Now for Global Business Updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Abati. Good morning, everyone out there. A little rainy day on Tuesday, and the rain is likely going to be falling on Tesla's earnings later today. So we're going to be looking at the focus after the bell closes. It's going to be Spotify, Visa, and Tesla, but all their focus is on Tesla, with the stock falling about 40% so far this year. Cutting prices, everything I previewed yesterday, so the numbers actually come out today. This is where earnings period really kicks off, so we'll see how things work out there. To the African continent, there's a new report out from Africa, the Big Deal, looking at the amount of funding that came into the African continent for startups, tech startups, in the first quarter of 2024. So the total amount raised, you should have the figures in front of you, is about $466 million. It was a decline of about 25%, I think quarter on quarter, and year on year the decline was about 46 or so. Yeah, 47% decline year on year. Now the equity portion of that raise that came into the African continent came out to about $332 million, a 9% drop quarter on quarter, 47% drop year on year. You know, there have been economic issues, you know, startups, or rather funding slowing down a bit because of headwinds and so on and so forth. The debt portion of that, 132 million, down 44% quarter on quarter, 46% year on year. The big four, remember we were talking about the big three yesterday with Drake, Joe Cole, and Kendrick Lamar, but the big four on Africa with respect to funding, no surprise, it's Nigeria, coming in at about 35% of the total funding, $160 million. Kenya in second place, 24% with about $108 million. South Africa and Egypt in third and fourth, 72 million, 53 million respectively. Crucially, what about the sectors? Where is the money going? Where are investors putting their money? This actually gives you a clue as to where the gaps are, and you know where investors think opportunities are for startups to make a change and solve problems. Transport and logistics was where most of the funding went to. About 151 million, 32% of that 466 million that came in. In second place, agriculture and food. You know what's going on here in Nigeria with food inflation at 40%. I mean, most people say you need to just open up the borders and get more imports in, but still, we have to address food here. So agriculture and food in second place, 50 million. Energy, talked a lot about energy and power. Third place, 49 million, 11%, and then healthcare. 45 million. Now, as far as the companies, the three companies that brought in the most funding, Move, which is a Nigerian company, brought in $100 million in the first quarter of this year. They're, of course, a vehicle financing company started by two Nigerians, big partnership with Uber. They're using that $100 million to scale their vehicle financing program across the nation. And if you've ordered ride hailing and seen those tiny little vehicles, that's part of what they're doing. In second place is Rome, which is a Kenyan startup that wants to scale electric vehicles across the continent. They raised $24 million in the first quarter of this year. And I think the third one is Hewatele, which is a healthcare startup. They want to provide oxygen, medical oxygen across the African continent. They raised, I think, about $20 million in the first quarter of this year. Final points. The percentage of funding that went to male-led startups, who wants to take a guess, was 99%. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done in founders, or rather investors, trusting female-led founders or female-led startups on the African continent with their money. So still a male-dominated game, unfortunately. We move from there to Bolt. Bolt, in fact, funny enough, is partnering with Rome to introduce electric motorcycles in Kenya. They are working, motorcycles are smaller than cars, less carbon emissions, easier to charge at home and outside. So that's an initiative that Bolt is working on to try and scale electric motorcycles across Kenya. Kenya, of course, as you've seen, second place after Nigeria in terms of the amount of startup funding that came in. M-Pesa. Rufai talks about M-Pesa all the time. Kenya is, and I met a number of Kenyans at the AI workshop in Abuja last week. From there, we go to President Tinubu. He, of course, heading off to the Netherlands for the Nigeria-Dutch Business Investment Forum. They're going to be talking about agriculture, water management, also port facilities, since the Dutch, the Rotterdam port and everything, they pretty much have a lot of expertise there. And then President Tinubu heads to Saudi Arabia for a special World Economic Forum meeting. It's going to be meeting up with investors. That's taking place on the 28th and the 29th of this month. And then I think Ayo already touched on this in the headlines, the quick run-up on the headlines. The Debt Management Office should be working on details on that US dollar bond, which of course I think maybe they want to benchmark interest rates and so on and so forth. So that's all we've got for our business roundup today.
Rotus, thank you so much. So Rotus, I mean, one thing has actually shown, and I've learned something. At first when Uber came, we said the disruptive model was the fact that, they don't have to own inventory. But you can now see that for you to be able to cut costs and optimize costs, you need your own inventory. So they're using Move now to be able to get their inventory. And that's why most of those 100 million is to cars, logistics, and everything that is pretty much owned as an asset, and to be able to make more on the cost. I mean, pretty much the same model the likes of Kobo 362 will start running at the likes. But that money is also paltry for a continent like Africa, where we think there should be a lot. Over 1 billion people continent. I mean, that money is not up to what a startup will make in one district in New York. And you know that. So we need to be able to see how we can expand that. Working on this local bond, it entails, yes, this local bond. Also, one thing we should be telling people, Rotus, is the fact that when you set up a bond, when you get the money, you will pay interest. And the bond money is not free. Bond is like just a future delayed loan. So we already have an encumbrance of about $1 trillion as regards all the bonds and the OMO we floated and everything. And that's why I see all the Goldman Sachs boys are licking us like Kobayashi now. They love us so much because they are making so much money from Nigeria. If you sit with a Goldman Sachs trader, they say Nigeria is the best thing ever as we speak. But all of those hot money that is slushing in is also having a repercussion because we have to pay back sometime down the line. So hope we're also thinking about this bond, while we're also thinking about this 2.25 billion that they say has a 10-year moratorium for a term of 40 years. It's not free money. All of this thing, Rotus, me and your children will pay it. Let's pepper Dr. Abati today because we'll have our children soon. And our children will pay for these bonds and pay for this loan. Amen, my brother.
Wow. I've never seen such enthusiasm to passing on debt to your generation, even though I cannot understand. But I totally get what you're saying and good news on that end. But I just wanted to quickly talk about your look at startups and funding, especially on the African continent. I think it's quite interesting that Nigeria is leader when it comes to the chunk of the 87% funding that goes to the African continent. And for good reason, I can still see that our numbers and the population counts for a lot, despite what we talk about, some of the non-incentives for investors to come into the country. We see that there's still a lot of interest, and as it ought to be in Nigeria. I'm quite surprised to see that South Africa comes third after Kenya, but like you rightly explained, due to the fact that Kenya is quite big when it comes to the fintech space, so you would understand that attraction of investment. But a few things to just talk about. Move, I don't know if it falls under the category of vehicle financing, and also there's a cross line between tech as well, because they use tech as a vehicle to achieving their aim of ensuring that businesses that they partner with are able to have access to vehicle financing. Two young British-born Nigerian men who are, Nigerian men who are driving Move, and just to see the business model. And if you look at their website, very youth-driven. Even the language that they use, very youth-driven, and just talks about the potential that we have, especially in the youth, amongst the youth demography in Nigeria, and more opportunities, hopefully, to attract more investment. Like before you mentioned, $100 million, yes, worthy of celebration in terms of the numbers, but when you look at the bigger picture, still quite a drop in the ocean when we talk about our opportunities for attracting funding. And so, then finally, to your point, and of course, I know you know I'll talk about this in terms of 99%. That's shocking. 99% of startup leaders being male, and I love that you centered on more confidence for female-owned businesses. It will be interesting, and I'm sure there are studies that have been done as to why there's such, a perhaps lack of trust in businesses like this. It will be interesting to find that out, because usually the word out there is that women are better managers. Women are able to lead organizations. If you look around the world, bring in their own input. So it'll be interesting. Is it that they are not able to communicate their ideas properly? Are there other skills that are, side by side that would be needed for investors beyond their ability to create ideas? I think that's something to look at, and that gap ought to be filled also by government investment in the next year as to how they can support more female-led startups to ensuring they're able to attract the investment that they need for their businesses to go to the next level. But excellent, thank you so much.
Okay, first, President Tinubu going off to the Netherlands for a business meeting, a diplomatic shuttle to discuss issues of port management and all of that. Well, and then from there he goes to Saudi Arabia to attend the session of the World Economic Forum on growth and energy and all of that. I've always made the point here that the president of Nigeria is the country's chief foreign policy officer. And I think that it's a good thing to see, President Tinubu taking the lead. And in many of these trips that he has made, either to India or to the G20, or even before now to the Middle East, part of the Middle East, we've seen, interest. And maybe that is linked also, apart from the monetary economic policy reconsiderations, to the inflow of, foreign portfolio investments into Nigeria. And our expectation is that this will translate even into direct investment. So the president cannot, give up. The only thing average Nigerians can complain about is to be monitoring the list of delegates to see whether the president, is keeping to his own prior affirmations. However, in terms of the president, going on these trips, it's important. It's part of the governance. It's an important aspect of our foreign policy projections. So we wish the president safe travel, and we look forward to Ajuri Ngelale, telling us about the fruits and the outcomes of this particular trip. And when it is May 29, these are some of the things we will collate and look at and say, well, on the foreign policy arena, this is what President Tinubu has been able to achieve. Now let's go to Kenya. You see Kenya, they're having electric motorcycles being brought, about 10,000, right? By Bolt, which is hail ride-hailing, company, and then also in collaboration with other companies. Now, yesterday, when we discussed, CNG vehicles in Nigeria, one of the lines in Mr. Bayo Ononuga's statement is that Nigeria is collaborating with some private companies who have already invested about $50 million. Now, this is one example, of how private sector can help a country drive the process of clean energy, Paris climate, agreement compliance and all of that. The only question that I will ask here, or that I will add here, is that if there are lessons that Nigeria can learn from the example in Ghana, and I'm sure there will be some lessons that we can learn from that example, that will be fine. Finally, with regard to fair trade and competition, the U.S. Trade Department has gone to court to file charges against the owners of Michael Kors bag, and another company trying to create a monopoly in the luxury market. And the whole issue here is about, fair trade, fair competition, because the argument is that if the two companies, Tapestry and Capri, if they come together, bags, we're talking about bags here, luxury bags, it's only people like Ayo who carry luxury bags. I know, it's big market. After all, LVMH, now accounts for a larger percentage of exports within the French economy. I don't know who buys these expensive bags.
It's men like you. Have you not been billed? Have you not bought Louis Vuitton?
Women buy
Have you not billed you?
Private matters are private. But in any case, what I'm saying is I would like a situation whereby Nigeria's competition bodies, trade bodies, also follow the example of the U.S. Federal Trade Commission that is always looking at antitrust issues. We don't deal with antitrust issues enough in Nigeria. Instead, we are busy sealing off supermarkets, checking people's bags, trying to look at everywhere. What Risco is doing with Chioma Okoli and all of that. But again, lessons that can be learned. Thank you very much.